let's take us into debate number 5. We've already heard a great deal about it. Culture. We're going to start with the antagonist squad. Perry, Esther, Precious. Perry, I understand you've got something a little bit technological you want to bring in. You want to do a screen share. Perry, are you coming up as the first speaker, or is Esther or Precious coming up? Is it you, Perry?
So we have Precious coming on first, and then Esther will take it away. I'm sharing now. Hope everybody can see it.
Alrighty, so for your first pitch here, first speaker, you've got 3 minutes. Over to you.
Good afternoon, members of the House. This is Precious from the Culture Antagonist team. So this afternoon, we would just like to demonstrate to you the kind of work that is required in order for us to close the gap and ensure that we're ready for the platform business that we'll be transitioning into. So as we've heard from previous speakers, culture is key. Everybody has been talking about culture, and we were actually joking that our work is done because everybody knows and realizes how important this is in terms of ensuring that our strategy is met. So culture, unfortunately for us, is also very vulnerable. It's vulnerable because it's something that is experienced and not felt. Very difficult to describe what it is. However, it also depends on people's moods, what's happening around, what's happening in the business, and for us right now, it's also dependent on COVID because it affects how we show up as leaders, how we lead teams, and that speaks to culture as well. So for us, we've been looking at the different aspects of culture based on the 2020 June strategy review session that was held. And basically, this is around the pillars that are client centricity, digitization, as well as engagement. And in there, we've packed in a lot of the culture themes that came in as well, the 5 culture themes. And when you look at our slide there, it speaks to some of the initiatives that were agreed as outcomes of culture and improved communication, ownership and accountability, building trust, consequence management, and building on what is already existing, and also talks about improving visibility. However, when you look at improving visibility now more than ever, it's very, very key that our people understand that it's more than just sending a weekly email. It requires people to build nudges that will carry us through the waves as we look at how we're going to transition into a digital platform. So when we look at some of the issues that are arising, I will let my colleagues go into the details for fear of repetition. So we're just going to ensure that I'd like to leave you with one point that you can think about, which says, obviously, culture, its strategy for breakfast, operational excellence for lunch, and everything else for dinner. And we're still saying that culture is not fat enough to carry us into the next transitioning wave that we'll be preparing for as we go into a digital platform business. So I'd like to end.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pause you over there. Thank you very much on that quote. We look forward to the rest of your team's presentation as it goes through. Interesting quote to wrap up with, and we'll see you back in the second round. Let's go to the first speaker from the other side, speaker number 2 on the other side. So first speaker opening up the other screen over here. I'm going to ask for the protagonist, please come up so we can see you. And I'm going to ask you, Perry, if you can just cancel the screen share for us, just so we can have the visibility back. Thank you. All right. First speaker from the protagonist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, the job has been done by the previous speaker. They have actually laid down the points for us. If you look at culture, we are talking about encompassing the customs and social behavior of all Stanbic employees. Obviously, this has assisted the bank to unlock potential and earn commitment from employees. In short, when we are talking about culture, we are talking about Stanbic deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. and talking strategy. We have 4 journeys of culture that can demonstrate the outcomes of the bank's TATA. This is the journey of culture. This is the journey of leadership, the journey of risk culture, the journey of adaptation to change. So when we talk about journey of culture, numbers don't lie. So you look at your ENPS scores, there's evidence that we have improved from 36% to over 40%. Just staff training, we have over 100, we have 100% staff trained. We want to be the best for our customers as well as for our staff. So what did we do with this? We did partner with the world's best customer-centric organization, and that's Disney World. So in short, what we just tried to do, we just laid the journey to make sure that we have a good leadership development plan. So we have set up a MANCO that is ready to take over from Exco one day. So if I left today, I know that there's someone who will take over immediately. So the bank-wide talent pool identified by Exco, this talent is agile. It can work in multiple functions. For example, Chalwe Tamele moved from IT to PBB. That's just a demonstration of this pool. We also have over 30% cross-functional talent. For example, the Dev Manco in CIB. So the journey of risk culture. I will steal from the previous pillar speakers who indicated that we have moved from reactive to proactive, and now we are looking at a proposal to having a predictive risk culture. Look at the journey of adaptation to change. Stanbic is passionate about delivering results, and we quickly did that by demonstrating that we could work despite the greatest pandemic in the world. We are agile and adaptive. So that's my submission, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Doris, thank you very much. I'm going to hold on questions. Nicely put across. You've given us 30 seconds in the can. I'm going to go across to a person that I've had the pleasure of working with for many years, and I'm very pleased to have on the panel. Kes, you've been listening to the first 2 debates. What's your take? We've heard from antagonist and protagonist, a vital topic, culture. What's your way in so far? Who are you swayed with, and what are you hoping to see in the rest of the debate? Going over to you, Kes.
Thanks, Steve. So right now I'm not swaying, unfortunately not swaying in any direction, because what I want to hear basically is that culture is a journey. So if I were to sway the pro way, I would be saying we've arrived when we clearly haven't. If I was to sway the other way, I would be saying we haven't done anything, but we are on a journey. So you've moved some blocks, there's still a way to go. So I'm very interested in hearing about some new ideas for how we move the culture, considering that the ask for next year is quite significant. Thanks.
Thanks, Kes. Walabito, what's your point?
Sorry.
Thanks. Like Kasa said, I think we've gotten more details from the protagonists trying to define what culture is and some of the scores. My interest is I would like to hear from the antagonists. What are some of the key issues? What are the changes they're proposing? What are the holes that they are poking into the strategy? So I'm hopeful, at least by the end of both presentations, we should be able to have a firm position by both. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lena, your thoughts. You've heard the 2 debates. What have you heard and what are you hoping for? Which way are you at the moment? Lena, could I ask you if you could you possibly adjust your screen? There we go. We got you. Beautiful. Okay. So tell us from your point of view, what have you seen and what are you hoping to hear?
Yeah, I think that it's still probably open in remarks and we still probably have some way to go. But what I'd really like to get out of this conversation is for the 2 teams to try to link back to the earlier conversations on the different pillars that we've had. So if we go back to the UFSO pillar, it seems that the challenge that is impeding us from achieving that objective is culture. If you go to the risk culture, that the risk of optimal risk conversation, it again talks to culture. So what you'll see is that the culture piece is woven through all the different pieces. Now, I don't want us to be discussing culture in isolation, but I'd like us to discuss culture aligned to the strategic pillars to say, how do we make sure that those strategic pillars change? It's a culture of ownership, it's a culture of cost management, it's a culture of risk management, it's a culture of awe. But overlying that is ultimately culture is something that we talk about. We talk about it every day. We talk about it. I've talked about it for the last 20 years of my working life, but we still don't get it right. What do we need to do differently to get it right? Who drives it? I'd like to hear that.
Lena, thank you very much. And I'd like you to keep that thoughts in mind, that piercing thought. What is it that we need to do differently, and who is it? Let's go across. Second speaker from the antagonist. Let's hear you up as we go. Come on forward, give them a round. Thank you very much. Doris, I see a hand up. I'm going to come back to you. Don't worry. You are noted. Don't feel rejected. I'm just moving into second speaker over here. So PowerPoint is up. Let's see. Who's coming through? Is it Esther or Perry? Perry, just remind me. Esther, remind me.
It's Esther now.
Thank you. Esther, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for your comments. To the panelists who have taken note of the feedback that you have asked for. It is true that culture indeed is a journey, and it'll take us some time to get there. But I think what we wanted to focus on is actually just to weave in the different conversations that we've had throughout the afternoon. And I think imperative for us was to start by looking at the client centricity and UFSO pillar, which are critical to the success and the strategy of Stanbic Zambia. So one of the things that we certainly picked up throughout the conversations, and based on our assessment of what we did in the first quarter, in the first half of the year, one of the areas that we picked up is that we still feel that the customer is not at the center of everything that we do. And if we were to change this in our culture, I think it will make a massive difference. There's a popular saying that says the customer is king. And that is indeed our primary stakeholder. And if we weave it into our values, one of the key things was delivering value to our stakeholders. So as a result of delivering value to our stakeholders, it means that our primary stakeholder, being the customer, is the one that we need to put at the center of what we do. If you look at the processes that we have from an operational point of view, from a compliance point of view, a lot of them are internally driven, as opposed to looking at the client's experience and trying to make it easier for the client to engage with us. This then translates into how our colleagues and employees also deal with the customers. They then come from that position of let's do what is good for the bank first before we actually serve our customer. The second issue that we found in the client centricity and UFSO piece that we need to also consider is that we still found the issue of silos across business unit lines was still quite strong. We found that teams tended to stick to their business or product lines, sometimes not being creative in order to define or to develop a solution for our client. And so we felt that, going into 2021, this is something that we needed to break. And we believe that with the new platform journey that we're on, where we're going to classify ourselves across client groupings as opposed to product lines, would make a very big difference in terms of how we move forward. But as we are today, there's still a very strong, a reverence to the business that you sit in. One of the things that we thought would be quite useful is in terms of how we actually report our client revenue. One of the key things that would be important to drive this culture would be for us to report revenue along customer lines, or even taking it further along ecosystem lines, which would then enable us to have an overall view and allow people to see the big picture as opposed to the individual views that we have. The other thing that would help us improve our culture was around solutions development that involved sometimes having the voice of the customer in the room. Sometimes we build solutions that are very, again, specific to what would be convenient for us in the bank. And sometimes we don't actually hear what the customer said. In a conversation that we had with one of our customers, Hitachi, one of the key things that they said is that you've really won in the public sector space. You've been able to assist us in paying our traffic fines. How are you integrating with immigration? So these are some of the things that we need to take into our solutions development and then allow us to be a lot more proactive in terms of delivering solutions. We also found from a product knowledge point of view, when we look at the customer, product knowledge was very biased to the unit that the individual sits in. There was little knowledge around what happens in other parts of the bank. And one of the things that we thought would be important was for us to introduce a KPI around level of cross-sell, irrespective of where that came from in the bank. This way, it'll encourage us to be more curious around what our offerings are, and so that our conversation with our clients is not just limited to the area of expertise that we sit in, but can be a lot broader. And that way, elements of reward and measuring the cross-sell would then change that culture. From a service point of view, in terms of client centricity and UFSO, we thought that there should be consistency. As discussed in the group around cost efficiency, one of the things that we found is that we've got multiple channels. It's very difficult for our customers to understand which channel to use. And depending, again, on which silo you end up as a customer, you're then now left to use only one particular or a few chosen channels. So it was for us to just say, can we have consistent service across these multiple channels that we offer services to our clients? The next piece we looked at was digitization, which is the heart of what we do. One of the things from a cultural point of view, we looked at a solution-based approach. But what we found as we're looking at the impact of digitization from a cultural point of view is that we had more of a blame focus as opposed to looking for solutions. We found that we're still very heavily reliant on group solutions in terms of resolving a lot of our issues. And because we are locally in the market, it was very important for us to start thinking of ways in which you can innovate locally. Yes, there are solutions that we have done on the ground, working with the likes of Probase, looking at elements of SmartPay. But we believe that there could be a lot more that we can do to be market relevant in Zambia, but leveraging, yes, on certain aspects.
I'm going to pause you there, Esther. Thank you very much. Very articulate. I've let you run a little bit over time. I was interested to hear your debate, and I was particularly intrigued in that KPI and creating a KPI that would create curiousness. Isn't that interesting? Lovely thought. Thank you very much. All right, let's cut across to the other side. Esther, thank you again. I'd like to hear the other side of the coin. Ready, starting the clock at 5 minutes, start.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The question that I'm asking is, do we have a good strategy? The answer that we have as a team is yes. We do have a good strategy, but can it get better? Yes, it can. So we are going to focus on a number of pillars as a team, and we're going to look at the challenges that we've faced before, and also a strategy going forward on how we can improve. So firstly, I'm going to talk about a culture of communication. So we have a culture of communication, and the reason why we launched this communication pillar is because initially when we started the culture journey, a lot of our staff said our culture was very top-down heavy. And then we said, okay, fine, what can we do to make that better? So a number of things was launched. So for instance, Slido, we have the town halls, we have the Tichezes, where CE actually has breakfast with a number of members of staff, and they talk about whatever issues that staff are facing. And that really has made us a very bottom-up communication type of organization. But can we do better? The answer is yes. In terms of communication, we can communicate better, especially now that we're living in a pandemic. Can we make these ways of communication more virtual? So we launched the virtual town halls. We've got the Ticheze breakfast that I talked about. We can actually make those virtual as well and have CE just have those one-on-ones in terms of breakfast or just a discussion with members of staff from across the country. And this will really get staff to open up. So that's a solution that we're coming up with. Another pillar that we've come up with is a culture of being a large. So this means breaking silos. And yes, we are living in a bank we are working in a bank that is full of silos, and we're trying to break that. And that's why the UFSO pillar is so important. But we need to continue with that streak. And I think one of the things that can really help us to break the silos is listening to the voice of the customer. The customer comes first. So this ties us into being having a culture that is customer centric. So if we're going to pull on customer centricity, we need to actually sit down and listen to the customer. During the digital presentation, somebody actually said, we have some of these products that we've launched, but were we listening to the customer when we launched them? Or was it something that we just said, this is lacking in the market and it's something that we can do? So we need to take time to actually listen to the customer. And how can we do this? How can we make ourselves have a culture that's customer centric? Well, we can have focus groups. And it doesn't have to be one-on-one focus groups, or we're sitting in a room with customers. We can do them virtually, but we just need to take time to listen to the customers through our RMs as well. Our RMs, as they communicate with the customers, let them also take time to ask questions that will get the customers to then give us what exactly they need. What are their banking needs? And that's what we need to answer. So we also have a culture of learning. Yes, Standard Bank has partnered with Salesforce, and we've got the fantastic Trailhead platform, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm hoping everybody on this, everybody here has signed on. But we've got Network Next, we've got Degreed, we've got the Trailhead, as I mentioned, we've got product knowledge, e-learnings, we've got mentorship, we've got our leadership center where trainings happen as well. So we need to continue with that culture of learning. And the reason why this is important is because when we underwent the culture journey, we realized that there was a lot of skills gaps in certain roles. And so the culture of learning is important, and also the lack of product knowledge by our own staff. I mean, there are particular products that we may not know about, and we can't explain them to our customers. And so a culture of learning is extremely important. A culture of ownership. I think culture is not an HC initiative. It's not something that one department can run on them by themselves. It's something that we all need to own. So we need to make sure that staff are aware that the culture that they want to see is actually driven by them. And this is where the culture champions really comes into play for me. So we've had a recent refocus on the culture champions, and the culture champions are focusing on a number of nudges, which is really driving the culture initiative or the culture journey in the bank. But it's something that we all need to jump up and join. We all need to come to the party. And because of that, we need to continue with in terms of communicating to staff on ownership, and on owning the culture journey and owning it in their own space. So basically, that's our submission from our team.
Shanda, thank you very much. Nicely done on time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the debate, and I'm going to put in a little bit of a twist here, because I've been thinking about Lena's comment as he opened it, and he said, do we have a culture of this? Do we have a culture of this, etc.? And just to test our culture. What I'd like to do, because this is such a pivotal point, and I've heard it from the beginning through each of the debates, I'd like to take us back to the first team, and I'd like to ask the second speaker from the client centricity team on the antagonist side. So listen carefully. I'd like to hear the second speaker from the client centricity team on the antagonist side weigh in on culture. I'd like your thoughts. You've been listening to the debates. I'm going to go back to the very first team. I'd like the second speaker from the client centricity team to weigh in and give us your thoughts from culture, client centricity, and what we need to evolve. Can I have that representative?
Thank you.
Thank you. 30 seconds, give us your comments. Over to you.
Yeah,
Wilson?
so yeah, I've heard the deliberations, but I think that from a customer centricity piece, we need to ensure that our staff understands what customer service is. So in terms of culture, we need to retrain or reskill our staff to be able to offer that service. So I think that it's a mind shift change that is required for us to be able to deliver. Thanks.
Wilson, thank you very much. I'd now like to look at the second team, and I'd like to go to the protagonist, second speaker. I'd like you to give me your comments. You've listened to the debate. I'd like to go back and I'd like to get your thoughts there. So second speaker from the protagonist side, debate 2, strategic universal relationships. What's your weigh in on culture? Let's hear.
Thank you. I got the message pretty well from the debating members. And I think what is coming out very prominent is the fact that culture is a journey, and a journey that has to be taken by each and every employee of the bank. So the culture has to be fed through each and every member in the bank as part of the working culture for each of the team members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going to the third team, I'd like to hear from the second speaker for the antagonist side. And here I'd like to look at managing a simple and cost-effective business model. I'd like to hear from the second speaker on the antagonist side from the third team. Weigh in and give us your comments. You've been listening to the culture discussion. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so look, I think I do agree in the sense that we've come a long way after the whole Disney launch of you know, the bank's rejig of culture. But then again, I think there's still some way to go, just in terms of how we interrogate each other and hold each other accountable. I think there's still a lot of room for people to feel comfortable that just because someone asks you a question about why wasn't this done this way is not a direct attack on you, but it's something that you're all trying to get to the same destination without leaving anyone behind. And once we get to those levels of comfort, even the innovation and all those creative juices will flow freely, and we'll be in a better place as a bank.
Alrighty, thank you. And just coming across to the second speaker for the fourth topic, the protagonist, I'd like to hear your thoughts on culture and how it relates to your topic. Over to you. Protagonist, topic 4.
Second speaker.
Second speaker, I'd like to hear your thoughts. You've been listening to the debates. You've developed some thoughts. I'd like to hear them. Thank you. Over to you.
All right, thanks. So there's 2 speakers for this group, myself and Liswani, so I'll go first. So when related to optimal risk management, for us, the message, I think, from the culture session is the need for consistency, as well as recognition of the right culture. So it fits well with the message that Chuma and Mlenga spread through. So those are the 2 issues I can point to. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's hear from your second speaker on the topic. Thank you.
All right. So for me, I think, yeah, it blends well with also the issue of risk management, in that there's more that we need to do in as far as awareness is concerned. Yeah, so that helps in terms of just driving the right culture across the bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Lena, I'm going to come back to you. I've deliberately done something a little different in this floor round. You asked the question, are we answering your question enough? Are we articulating the shift in the culture, what we need to do differently enough? Lena, back to you.
Yeah, Steve, I'm not sure we are, to be honest, and I think it's because we are probably not being very honest with ourselves and really scratching this issue of culture, and maybe in trying to contextualize why I still feel a bit like we are not really addressing it is 2 things. I'm glad Victor mentioned Disney. Disney is a product that if I was to ask most people, and I have so, to say on a scale of 1 to 10, do we think that we did well in it? There's very few people in the bank today who can still relate to what Disney was trying to achieve. And it was a wonderful, wonderful project. Steph, I think it was Steph or something that's like that. Very clear, but we've lost it. We have another cultural burning platform that we have today that speaks about consistency, communication. But again, it's almost like you have to constantly push it down people's throats to actually live it, because culture gets to be what we want it to be when it gets into your subconscious mind, when you start to not think about the need to exercise and practice Ubuntu. And a lot of the cultural values are already entrenched in our Ubuntu. But when we get to the office, it's almost like we throw out those values and become very antagonist with our friends. We don't greet our friends and so forth. And those are the key values, but we almost have to remind people. And that's why I'm saying, what do we need to do to get our cultural pillars into our subconscious mind, where we don't need to remind ourselves of consistency, where we don't need to remind ourselves of the values of communicating, constructive communication, where we don't have to second guess ourselves around trust. I mean, the issue of trust is still an issue. It's better, probably somewhat better, but it's an issue. And the reason we say it's an issue is that Slido is an example of what we used, and people prefer to be anonymous. And the reason you prefer to be anonymous is that you just don't trust what the outcome of your interventions will be. So I don't think we're there yet. And I just want to leave and close probably with something I'm always saying. I say, and it's probably more relevant now, what I'm going to say, and you'll relate to it because I've said it many times, than it's been before. When we start talking about platform businesses, and again, to borrow from Sim's presentation, he says we want to be a mall, a shopping mall. And the whole idea of being a shopping mall is to widen our revenue base. Now, Disney was not established to be a management cultural business. It was established to be an entertainment business with Mickey Mouse and all those comics, and to bring people into this fantasy world. But they've been able to develop a revenue line, and I'm not suggesting that we do, but I'm trying to say ultimately our goal must be to get to a point where we become an epitome of what cultural value is in terms of high performing bank. Why can't we be highlighted in the group, the Standard Bank group, to say, if you want to know what good culture is in a bank, go to Zambia. People should be calling us and saying, how did you guys do it? How can we do that? And there's no textbook to doing it right. It's all about how we drive it and how we own it. And so the parting shot is, how do we become a Disney of culture at Stanbic Bank Zambia, so that people can come to us? And maybe, you don't know, maybe in future, as we have a platform business, we can actually have another revenue generating arm that is purely around culture.
Thank you very much. I've deliberately done that because I'd like to hear specifically from the closers. So closers, when I said to you today, I'm looking for the sharpest people. I'm looking for the people to listen to the conversation. You're going to come back now. I want to hear closing arguments from either side. Lena's given you a prompt. He's given you a fantastic line in. Let's hear from the antagonist for the culture topic close. Let's have your 3 minutes. Ready, start. I think you're on mute. Perry, over to you.
Okay, so it's almost taking this one. Go ahead.
Yes. So I was saying we're actually very grateful that the CE made that comment, because we did look at trust issues as an issue for culture. And it was our view that the strategy on culture as it currently stands is not ready to take us to the future, because we still see that employees there's still distrust among employees. And so in order to deal with those trust issues, we have proposed that maybe we need to re-socialize our leaders on appropriate use of consequence management, because we noted that there are instances when consequence management should be used as a tool to encourage, but in some instances it has been used as a way to actually drive a culture that we don't want. For example, if a person takes an initiative and makes a decision, their culture has been in such a way that people are afraid to make decisions because they're afraid that they'll face consequence management in the negative sense if the decision doesn't produce the right sort of the desired outcome. So instead of stifling decision making in that sense, we should promote it by re-socializing our leaders on the appropriate consequence management tools. And then also to drive UFSO culture, where we are looked at as one bank by the client. We were proposing that we need to infuse cross-selling as well as UFSO itself as a measurement parameter for performance, irrespective of the unit that the person sits in and irrespective of the product. The other thing we were proposing in terms of driving the right culture on digitalization, we noted that, yes, we are driving a strategy to go to be a digital bank. But when you look at the current status of the staff, most of them don't even understand the digital platforms that are sitting in the bank. So in order to drive this digitalization culture, we need to have digitally savvy staff. It means we must educate our staff. We must also promote utilization of the current existing digital platforms by our staff. And so to do this, we propose that within our strategy, we put in incentives for staff to utilize the digital platforms as well as to know about these digital platforms. And then the other thing on employee engagement, we looked at the fact that there's no transparency in communication. What we mean by this is that communication usually comes late and after people have already started to discuss what they think the communication should look like. Issues like the group architecture, there have been whispers, but people do not know what's happening. So what we are saying here, we're recommending that there should be timely and accurate communication on issues that affect the staff and that affect the organization. That way, staff will be able to, they'll be engaged in what they're doing, and then they'll also drive their strategy. And lastly, in terms of driving client focus culture, we're saying let the staff be involved in coming up with client solutions by facilitating some of these client focus group discussions. So we invite clients and we have the clients to speak to.
Well done. You're slightly over time. I'll let you run a little bit to hear your point. Thank you so much. Let's go to the closer on the other side. Your 3 minutes start now. Over to you. Please will you release the screen share? Thank you. Closer from the protagonist. You're on mute. All righty, let's try that again. Closer from the protagonist. Still
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Over to you. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, moderator. I'll start my presentation and our closing remarks with a quote from a gentleman called Toby Rick. Toby Rick says, corporate culture is a hard thing to get right. It's a moving target that means something different to everyone. It grows and evolves over time. It is the result of action and reaction. From a bank perspective, we are arguing that we have the right culture. We have the right culture. We have a great culture because we have a culture that promotes friendliness. We have a culture that promotes communication. We have a culture that promotes growth through learning and development. Collaboration, obviously, is what achieves results. Standing today, we say we are the #1 bank, and indeed we are the #1 bank as a result of collaboration. Collaboration is well interlinked with communication, and that is why we're the #1 bank as a result of that great culture. We also argue that we have shown agility. We are ready for 2021. Agility from the fact that we have a number of e-learnings that have been put together to ensure that staff are reskilled, they are retrained, and they are ready for 2021. We have shown that agility. As we speak right now, the bank is operational, and yet most of senior management from an EXCO and a MANCO perspective are operating from home. That is because we have embedded a culture of agility. We have embedded a culture of communication, and indeed there's been a lot of communication. We also argue that we have a culture that promotes client centricity. Right now, we have 3 customer journeys or client journeys. The way we came up with those client journeys was collaboration and engagement of customers. We asked customers, what are your 3 main pain points? They said lending takes too long. They said it's very difficult for us to open an account. They said it's also difficult for us to deposit cash. And we have taken these 3 client journeys and developed solutions to a point where within a minute, somebody can access an unsecured personal loan. We have spoken about strategic universal relationships. We have built a culture where we are collaborating with other partners. We've collaborated with MTN. We've collaborated with Airtel. We're one of the few banks that have integrated into the CRB. We are one of the few banks that have been ahead in terms of integrating into the NFS. And again, that is because we value universal, strategic universal relationships. We also have a strong risk culture, actually. We would argue we are forums such as CRMC, we are forums such as ROC, where risks around the bank are communicated and discussed. As we speak now, our operational losses are at 0.21%, and that is a demonstration of the fact that we have a strong risk culture. From a digitization perspective.
Thank you very much. I'm going to interject there. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you done enough, Mr. Speaker? Have you done enough?
I think that's a fair question. We are not arguing that we have arrived. We are arguing that we have started the journey and we are right on course in that journey. Like we opened, we're saying that there's a lot of interaction. It's all about action and reaction. And it's a continuous process of engaging customers and staff to get it right.
Thank you. All righty. Cass, I opened with you. I'm going to go back. I asked you which way you swayed after the first round. Cass, what's your verdict? Do you vote for the antagonist or the protagonist? Prosecution or defense? Which way have you gone?
I'll go with, I'm a bit middle. I'll go with the pro.
You're going with the protagonist. All righty. Walabita, which way are you going?
I'll go with the pro because of the fact that we have a strategy towards it. However, to see his question, I think the thing that was running through my mind is, should we keep on tracking culture as a standalone pillar, seeing that it is integrated and interwoven through all the pillars? But for these purposes, I would go with the pro. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Salina, it's almost me not asking you the question, but out of curiousness, who will you go with, protagonist or antagonist?
I think I'm probably too harsh, so I'm going to go with the antagonist because I think that there's still a lot of work to be done in that space. We certainly acknowledge the work that has been achieved, but I think that we still need to kind of cross that bridge. So antagonist.
Understood.
In line with my earlier comments. I think it's in line with my earlier comments.
Understood. Taken. On the balance of votes, of course, it goes to the protagonist, 2-1, but work to be done there.